The space station called Fortune floated in the darkness between stars. It was a place where the rich and powerful came to buy things that could not be found anywhere else. Rare animals, strange plants, living creatures from forgotten worlds. Some people called it a market. Others knew it was something worse. On this day, hundreds of aliens walked through the long hallways of the station. They were with their pale blue skin and cold eyes. They were an old species, proud of their ancient empire. They were covered in golden fur, always looking for beautiful things to add to their collections. There were scientists with too many arms, searching for new specimens to study. They all moved past rows of cages. Inside those cages were creatures from across the galaxy. Some were beautiful, some were dangerous, all of them were for sale. In cage 47, at the very end of the hall where the lights were dim and few buyers bothered to walk, there was a dragon. He was not a true dragon. The true dragons had died long ago, hunted and killed until none remained. This creature was one of the last survivors of a species that most people had forgotten. His scales should have been black and shining like polished stone. Instead, they were dull and cracked, like old pottery left in the sun. His wings hung against his sides, thin and weak. His eyes, which should have burned with inner fire, looked empty and tired. Around his neck was a metal collar. The collar was old and covered with green rust. On its surface, strange symbols were carved into the metal. No one knew what the symbols meant. Every translator in the galaxy had tried to read them. Every translator had failed. The auctioneer, a fat in expensive robes, walked up to the cage. He looked at the dragon with disgust. "Lot 47, he announced to the small crowd that had gathered. "A specimen, adult male, age unknown but estimated at several thousand years." The crowd murmured. A few buyers leaned forward with interest. Dragons were rare. Even a damaged one might be worth something. "However," the auctioneer continued, and his voice became flat with disappointment, "this unit is defective. It does not respond to commands. It refuses to fly. It refuses to breathe fire. It refuses to bond with any owner. The inscription on its collar appears to be some kind of curse mark from its. We believe this is why it is broken." The interest in the crowd died quickly. Buyers turned away. "This unit has been returned 7 times, the auctioneer admitted. "Starting bid is 500 credits. Silence filled the auction hall. 300 credits. Still nothing. Inside the cage, the dragon did not move. He did not lift his head. He had been through this before. Many times. He knew how it would end. Someone would buy him because he was cheap. They would try to make him perform, try to make him fly or breathe fire or speak. He would refuse. They would grow angry. They would hurt him. Eventually, they would give up and sell him again. It had been this way for 200 years. The dragon had learned that hope was just another kind of pain. 100 credits, the auctioneer said, his voice tired. Anyone. At the back of the auction hall, a human woman stood with her young son. Her name was Doctor, and she worked as a language expert for the Earth government. She was not here to buy anything. Humans had only joined the galactic community 40 years ago. They did not have the money or the power to shop at places like Fortune. Doctor was here only to watch and learn. Her son was 12 years old. His name was, and he had brown eyes that noticed everything. While his mother talked with other diplomats, had wandered through the auction hall looking at the creatures in their cages. Most of them made him sad, but when he reached cage 47, he stopped walking. The dragon was the most beautiful and the most broken thing had ever seen. "Mom," said, pulling at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, come look." Doctor sighed. She was in the middle of an important conversation. "What is it?" "The dragon, the one they say is broken. What does his necklace say?" Doctor looked at cage 47. She saw the old collar with its strange symbols. She took out her optical scanner, a small device that could translate almost any language in the galaxy. The scanner hummed as it studied the inscription. "I don't know," she said finally. The translator cannot read it. It is probably some dead language that no one speaks anymore. But I can read it, said. Doctor stared at her son. What do you mean? Had always been different from other children. While other kids played games and watched shows, studied old languages, dead languages, he had taught himself to read ancient Earth scripts that most scholars had forgotten. He had spent years learning the patterns of how languages worked, how symbols carried meaning, how even lost words could be understood if you looked at them the right way. His teachers said he had a gift. Other children said he was weird, did not care what anyone said. He loved the puzzle of languages. He loved finding meaning where others saw only mystery. The symbols on the dragon's collar were not any language had seen before, but the patterns were familiar. The way the shapes fit together reminded him of something he had read in an old book, a book about a language that was supposed to be lost forever. It is not a curse, said softly, it is a name. In the cage, the dragon's eyes moved. For the first time in many years, something that looked almost like attention appeared in those ancient eyes. 100 credits, the auctioneer called one last time. Final offer. If there are no buyers, this unit will be sent for disposal. Disposal knew what that meant. They would kill the dragon because no one wanted him. Mom said, and his voice was urgent now. Mom, we have to buy him. We cannot afford. 100 credits. We have 100 credits. Please, Mom, they are going to kill him, and I can read his name. No one else can read his name. Doctor looked at her son. She looked at the dragon in the cage. She thought about all the rules she would be breaking, all the trouble she might cause. Then she raised her hand. 100 credits, she called out. The auctioneer looked surprised. Humans almost never bought anything here, but credits were credits. Sold, he said. Lot 47 goes to the human delegation. And that was how Doctor, a language expert from Earth, bought a dragon for the price of a cheap dinner. It was an amount that would later become famous as the greatest bargain in the history of the galaxy. But at that moment, as the cage was opened and the dragon was let out with chains around his legs, no one understood what had really happened. No one except a 12-year-old boy who looked at the inscription on the collar and saw not a curse, but a name. And perhaps, just perhaps, a story waiting to be told. The transport shuttle moved slowly through the darkness of space. Inside, Doctor sat in the pilot's seat, guiding the small ship back toward the human embassy station. Behind her, in the cargo area, sat across from the dragon. The dragon had not spoken a word. According to the records, he had been silent for 200 years. Previous owners had tried everything to make him talk. They had offered rewards. They had made threats. They had caused pain. Nothing worked. The dragon simply looked at them with those empty, tired eyes and said nothing. Now those eyes were watching. There was something different in them, something that had not been there before. It might have been curiosity. It might have been fear. It was hard to tell. Did not try to make the dragon speak. Instead, he opened his bag and took out a small tablet computer. On the screen was page after page of notes, drawings, and symbols. These were studies, the result of years of work on dead languages. Had always been strange. His mother knew it. His teachers knew it. Even himself knew it. While other children learned Galactic Common, the language that everyone in the galaxy spoke, had become obsessed with languages that no one spoke anymore. It had started when he was 7 years old. His grandmother had given him an old book about Earth's ancient civilizations. In that book, had seen pictures of stone tablets covered with strange symbols. The symbols were called Linear A, and no one on Earth had ever been able to read them. The civilization that created them had died thousands of years ago, taking their language with them. Most people thought Linear A was impossible to decode, spent 2 years proving them wrong. He did not do it the way scholars did it. Scholars looked for patterns they already knew. They tried to connect the unknown symbols to languages they understood. When that did not work, they gave up. Did something different. He looked at the symbols not as letters or words, but as pieces of a puzzle. He studied how they fit together. He noticed which symbols appeared most often. He paid attention to how symbols changed when they appeared in different positions. Slowly, piece by piece, he figured out what they meant. By the time he was 10, had done the same thing with 3 more dead languages. Scholars wrote papers about his work. Some of them did not believe a child could do what had done, but the results spoke for themselves. Was not a genius in the normal way. He was not good at math or science. He did not understand politics or social rules. But when he looked at a page of unknown symbols, something happened in his brain. He saw connections that other people missed. He found meaning where others saw only chaos. His mother called it a gift, was not sure if it was a gift or just a different way of seeing things. Either way, it was what he did. It was who he was. Now, on the shuttle, looked at the symbols on the dragon's collar. He had taken pictures of them with his tablet, and he was studying them carefully. The symbols were not like anything humans had created. They were curved and flowing, like water frozen in mid-movement. Some of them seemed to glow faintly, though that might have been a trick of the light. They were beautiful in a way that made his heart hurt. He remembered where he had seen something similar. It was in an old journal, written by an archaeologist who had died long ago. The archaeologist had found fragments of stone on a dead planet, a planet that had been destroyed in a war 3,000 years before humans learned to make fire. On those fragments were symbols that no one could read. The archaeologist had tried to guess what they might mean. He had called them prime script, the sacred language of the dragons. No complete texts in that language had ever been found. The civilization that created it had been destroyed so completely that almost nothing remained. It was supposed to be a language that would never be decoded, a mystery that would never be solved. But saw the patterns. The symbols on the collar were not exactly like the fragments from the dead planet. They were more complex, more complete, but the basic structure was the same. The way the symbols nested inside each other, the way they flowed from one to the next. The patterns were there and could see them. He worked for 3 hours while the shuttle flew through space. His mother checked on him twice, but she knew better than to interrupt when was focused like this. The dragon watched him the whole time, those ancient eyes following every movement of his hands. Finally looked up. "Your name," he said softly, "is Hen." The dragon's whole body went still. His dull scales seemed to catch the light in a way they had not before. "It means he who carries the last fire," continued. "That is what your name means. It is written right here on your collar." The dragon did not move. He did not blink. He seemed to have stopped breathing. "But there is more," said. He pointed to smaller symbols carved beneath the name. "This part is different. It is not part of your name. It is a message." He read the words slowly, carefully, making sure he had them right. "I am not a beast. I am a witness. My silence is my promise. Only speak to one who speaks my truth." For a long moment, nothing happened. The shuttle hummed quietly. The stars moved past the windows. Doctor's voice came over the speaker, saying they would arrive at the embassy in 20 minutes. Then the dragon spoke. His voice was like stones grinding together. It was rough and broken, rusted from centuries of disuse. But it was a voice, and it was speaking words. "Little human," the dragon said, "how do you know the tongue of my dead world?" Felt tears in his eyes, though he did not know why. "I do not really know it," he admitted. "I just saw the patterns. I figured out what the symbols meant. Humans are good at patterns." The dragon made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your species has existed for the blink of an eye. You should not be able to read words that were ancient before the discovered fire. You should not be able to speak my name." "Nobody told us we could not," said simply. Looked at him for a long time. Then something changed in the dragon's eyes. The emptiness began to fill with something else. It was not joy, not yet, but it was the beginning of something. the first small light after a long darkness. "You are a strange creature, little human," said. "Your people are very young, very small, very short-lived, and yet you have done what no other species in 3,000 years could do." "I just read your name," said. "That is all." "No," the dragon's voice was growing stronger now, less broken. "You did far more than that. You read the words that bound me. You spoke the truth that set me free. For 200 years I have waited. I have been silent. I have been patient, because my oath commanded me to speak only to one who could speak my truth." He lowered his great head until his eyes were level with. Those eyes were not empty anymore. They burned with a fire that had never seen before. "And now," said, "I can finally tell my story." The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A human child had done the impossible. He had read the sacred language of a language that had been dead for 3,000 years. He had broken the silence of a dragon that had not spoken for 2 centuries, and the dragon had a story to tell. Within days, reporters from every species came to the human embassy. Scientists demanded to study his brain. Historians begged for interviews with. Politicians from the Galactic Council sent urgent messages, asking what this all meant. Doctor did her best to protect her son from the chaos. She set up meetings at specific times. She made sure he had time to rest and eat and be a normal child. But even she knew that nothing would be normal again. Grew stronger with each passing day. His scales, which had been dull and cracked, began to shine with a deep black color, like the space between stars. His wings, which had hung limp and weak, stretched out strong and wide. His eyes, which had been empty, now burned with an inner light that made people step back when he looked at them. He ate real food for the first time in decades. He flew in the large training room of the embassy, his wings carrying him in great circles near the ceiling. He talked with for hours, teaching the boy more of the language, sharing memories of his lost world. But he saved his biggest story for the Galactic Council. The council chamber was the largest room on the central station of the galactic government. It could hold representatives from every species in known space. Today, it was completely full. Everyone wanted to hear what the dragon had to say. Stood in the center of the chamber. He was magnificent now, fully restored to his ancient strength and beauty. His scales gleamed. His wings were folded against his back like a cloak of darkness. Around his neck, he still wore the metal collar with its sacred inscription. "I will tell you a story," said. His voice filled the chamber, strong and deep. "It is a story that your historians have forgotten. It is a story that your governments have hidden. It is the truth of what happened 3,000 years ago when my people died." The chamber was silent. Not a single being moved or whispered. "My people were called began. We lived on a world called Prime, a planet of mountains and fire and sky. We were old when they were still learning to build houses. We were wise when they were still hunting in forests. We had powers that even now you do not fully understand." He paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. His gaze stopped for a moment on the delegation. "We could breathe fire, yes, but not just normal fire. We could breathe the fire that burns between dimensions, the fire that exists in the spaces between reality. With this fire we could destroy anything. Stars, planets, entire fleets of ships. We were the most powerful species in the galaxy." Murmurs ran through the chamber. This was not what the history books said. The history books said the dragons had been dangerous beasts, monsters that threatened civilization. "But we did not use our power to conquer," continued. "We used it to create, to build, to protect. We lived in peace with the other species of the galaxy. We shared our knowledge. We helped younger races grow and learn." His voice became heavy with sorrow. "Then the Empire decided that we were too dangerous to exist." The ambassador stood up. "This is lies," he said. "The cleansing wars were a necessary act of self-defense. The dragons attacked us first. They were mindless beasts who—" I was there, said, and his voice was so cold that the ambassador stopped talking immediately. I was the royal chronicler of Prime. My job was to remember everything, to record every event, to be a witness to history. I remember what really happened. He turned back to the full council. They wanted our world, they wanted our resources, they wanted our power. When we refused to give these things, they gathered a great fleet and came to destroy us. Closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were filled with a pain so deep that some of the representatives had to look away. My people had a choice. We could fight. We could use the dimensional fire, the fire that burns between realities. We would have lost eventually. They had numbers on their side. But before we lost, we could have taken half the galaxy with us. We could have burned their empire to ashes. We could have destroyed every world that stood against us. The chamber was completely silent now. Everyone understood what was saying. The dragons could have caused destruction beyond imagination. They had chosen not to. Our elders made a different choice, said. They chose to die quietly. They chose to walk into the fire themselves rather than become the monsters that they claimed we were. They chose peace, even though peace meant death. His voice broke slightly. I watched my world burn. I watched my family, my friends, my entire civilization walk into flames they created themselves. They did this because they believed that someday someone would remember the truth. Someone would know that we were not beasts. We were not monsters. We were people who loved and dreamed and hoped, just like everyone else. He looked directly at the ambassador. Your ancestors committed genocide. They murdered an entire species because they were afraid and greedy. Then they wrote history books that called us animals, so they would not have to feel ashamed. The ambassador's face was pale. He said nothing. The elders knew this would happen, continued. So they chose some of us to survive, to witness, to remember. They put sacred oaths on us, binding us to silence. We could not speak until someone proved they were worthy of hearing the truth. He turned to look at, who sat in the observer gallery with his mother. The boy looked small surrounded by all these powerful aliens, but his eyes were steady and calm. For 3,000 years I waited, said. I was sold from owner to owner. I was treated as a beast, a trophy, a curiosity. Every species I met looked at me and saw only an animal. They tried to make me perform tricks. They tried to make me a weapon. They never once thought that I might be a person with a story to tell. He walked toward the gallery where sat. Every eye in the chamber followed him. Then a human child looked at me and saw something different. He did not see a beast. He saw a puzzle, a mystery, a language waiting to be decoded. He spent hours studying the inscription on my collar, not because anyone told him to, but because he wanted to understand. Stopped in front of, his great head bowed slightly in respect. Humans are strange, he said, speaking now to the whole council but looking at. They are young, they are small, they live such short lives, but they do something that no other species does. They care about things that are not their own. They learn languages they will never speak. They study cultures they will never visit. They cry for peoples they never knew. He turned back to face the council. This boy wept when he read of my world's destruction, a destruction that happened before his species learned to write. He wept for people he had never met, for a civilization that existed only in fragments and footnotes. His voice rose, filling the great chamber. That is why I chose to speak to him. That is why I broke my 3,000-year silence for a human child. Because only humans looked at me and saw not a beast, but a person. Not a mystery to be ignored, but a story waiting to be heard. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted questions. The delegation tried to leave. Historians demanded more details, but through it all, sat quietly, looking at the dragon who had been silent for so long, and looked back at him with eyes that burned with the last fire of a dead world, finally set free. The truth about the changed everything. In the Empire, people took to the streets. For 3,000 years, They had been taught that their ancestors were heroes who saved the galaxy from monster dragons. Now they learned that their ancestors were murderers who committed genocide against a peaceful civilization. Some refused to believe it. Others demanded that their government apologize. The Empire, which had been the strongest power in the galaxy began to crack from the inside. But something even more surprising happened in the months that followed speech. Other dragons began to speak. They had been hiding in plain sight across the galaxy, sold as beasts at auctions kept in cages by collectors, used as guards by wealthy merchants. For 3,000 years they had stayed silent, bound by the same sacred oath. They had watched and waited, suffering in silence, hoping that someday someone would come who could break their chains. Now that day had arrived. On a mining station in the outer reaches, a dragon named spoke for the first time in 1,800 years. Her owner, a merchant, had treated her as a pet for decades. He fainted when she looked at him and said, "I am not your property. I never was." On a research station, 3 dragons who had been studied as specimens broke their silence together. They had been poked and prodded and tested for centuries, always refusing to respond. Now they demanded to be treated as the sentient beings they were. Across the galaxy, one by one, the surviving found their voices again. There were not many of them, perhaps 200 in total, scattered across thousands of worlds, but each one carried memories of their lost civilization. Each one had stories to tell, and now, finally, they could tell them. Became famous. He did not want to be famous. He was still just a boy who liked studying languages, but the galaxy did not care what he wanted. News programs talked about him constantly. Scientists wrote papers about his unique cognitive abilities. Politicians tried to use him as a symbol for their causes. His mother did her best to protect him. She turned down most interview requests. She refused to let corporations use his image. She made sure he still had time to study and play and be a normal child, as much as that was possible anymore. But had work to do. With help, he began to reconstruct the language. The inscription on the collar was just the beginning, remembered thousands of words, phrases, songs, and poems. He had been trained since birth to memorize the important texts of his people. For 3,000 years, he had kept those memories alive inside his mind, waiting for the day when he could share them. Now he taught them too, and with his gift for patterns, learned faster than anyone thought possible. Other humans joined the effort. Linguists from Earth's universities came to study with and they set up computer programs to analyze the language structure. They created databases of words and grammar rules. Within a year, they had built the foundation of the first dictionary in 3,000 years. They were not happy about this. Their government tried to claim that the dragons were lying, that the whole thing was a human trick to gain power. But there was too much evidence now. Too many dragons with the same stories. Too many pieces of history that fit together perfectly. The ambassador who had interrupted speech was removed from his position. The new ambassador, a younger with tired eyes, came to the human embassy to make a formal apology. "My people did a terrible thing," she said too. "We cannot undo it. We cannot bring back your world or your people, but we can admit the truth even if it shames us." Looked at her for a long moment. "Shame is not punishment," he said finally, "but truth is a beginning." It was not forgiveness. Perhaps forgiveness was not possible for something so enormous, but it was something, a crack in the wall that had stood for 3,000 years. One evening, as the embassy station orbited slowly through space, sat on the observation deck with. They often came here when the work was done for the day. Liked to look at the stars. Liked to remember. "Why do your people care so much?" asked. His voice was gentle now, nothing like the broken rasp it had been when they first met. "You have no connection to my world. My people died before your species even existed. Why do humans spend so much time and energy trying to save languages and stories that are not their own?" thought about the question for a long time before answering. Because we know what it feels like to lose things, he said finally. Tilted his great head. What do you mean? Humans have lost a lot too, said. Not like you lost everything, but we have lost languages, cultures, whole peoples. Sometimes we did it to ourselves. Sometimes others did it to us. My grandfather was born in a refugee camp. His parents' country does not exist anymore. It got absorbed by another country when he was a baby. He never saw his homeland. The stars moved slowly past the windows. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness, was the empty space where Prime had once orbited. My grandfather taught my mom the old songs from his country, continued. And she taught me. I cannot speak the language very well, but I know the lullabies, I know the stories. They are not really mine, but I carry them anyway. He looked up at. Maybe that is why humans try so hard to remember, because we know how much it hurts to be forgotten. We have done it to each other so many times. We have been the ones who destroyed, and we have been the ones who were destroyed. So when we see someone else losing their stories, we want to help save them. Was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he began to sing. The song was in the sacred language that had worked so hard to learn. It was soft and sad, a melody that seemed to hold all the sorrow of a lost world. Recognized some of the words. It was a lullaby, a song that parents had sung to their children at night, 3,000 years ago on a world that no longer existed. When the song ended, asked, "Will you teach it to me?" Yes, said, I will teach you all the songs, all the stories, all the words. You have given me back my voice. Now I will give you everything I have left to give. Outside the observation deck, the stars continued their slow dance through the darkness. But something had changed. A fire that had almost gone out was burning again. A people who had been forgotten were being remembered. And a human boy, sitting beside a dragon, began to learn a lullaby that was older than his entire species. 10 years had passed since a 12-year-old boy bought a broken dragon for 100 credits. Was 22 now. He stood tall in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, wearing the formal robes of a human diplomat. His brown eyes, which had once noticed strange symbols on a rusty collar, now looked out at representatives from every species in known space. Beside him stood the dragon who had been silent for centuries and was now known throughout the galaxy as the elder speaker of the remnant. His scales gleamed like polished obsidian. His eyes burned with inner fire. He looked nothing like the broken creature that had sat in cage 47 all those years ago. Was about to ask the council for something that had never been done before. Distinguished representatives, he began, his voice steady and clear. I come before you today with a proposal. For too long, we have allowed languages and histories to die. We have watched civilizations fade into silence. We have let stories disappear because we thought they did not concern us. He paused, looking around the chamber. They were almost lost forever. If not for a metal collar with an inscription that no one bothered to read, we would know nothing of their true history. How many other peoples have vanished without anyone to tell their story? How many languages have died because no one thought to learn them? The chamber was quiet, could feel the weight of attention from thousands of beings. I am here to propose the Heritage Initiative, he continued. A galaxy-wide program to recover, preserve, and teach the languages and histories of lost civilizations. Human linguists will work alongside survivors of endangered species. Computer systems will help reconstruct dead languages from fragments. Schools will teach the stories of peoples who no longer exist. The representative stood up. He was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a skeptical expression. This proposal is unnecessary, he said. The past is the past. Our resources would be better spent on the future. Why should we waste time and money on languages that no one speaks anymore? Had expected this question. He had been preparing for it for years. With respect, Ambassador, he said, the past is never past. It lives in us. It shapes who we are. The species we have become, all of us, was built on the work of those who came before. He gestured to. For 3,000 years, they kept their silence because the galaxy told them they were beasts, because no one bothered to read the words around their necks, because everyone assumed they had nothing important to say. His voice grew stronger. How many other silences are we ignoring right now? How many stories are we losing every single day? There could be a survivor on some forgotten world, waiting for someone to ask the right question. There could be an inscription on some old stone that would change everything we know about history, but we will never find out if we do not look. The vote happened 3 hours later, after speeches and arguments and private negotiations in back rooms. Stood with his mother, who had come to watch her son speak to the most powerful beings in the galaxy. She looked older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes were proud. When the final count came in, the Heritage Initiative had passed. The vote was close, but it was enough. Human resources, human passion, human stubbornness had made the difference. Many species had voted no, saying it was a waste of time. But humans, along with the surviving and a few other species who understood loss, had pushed hard enough to win. After the chamber emptied, found on the observation deck, the dragon often came here, looking out at the stars where his world had once existed. "You have done something remarkable," said as stood beside him. "Not just for my people, for all the peoples who have no one left to remember them." Smiled. "We are still the youngest species in the galaxy. Everyone keeps reminding us. We have a lot of catching up to do." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Perhaps, or perhaps that is exactly why you were needed." He turned to look at with those ancient, burning eyes. The old species grew tired. We forgot how to care about things that did not concern us directly. We stopped asking what the inscriptions meant. We stopped wondering about the stories we did not know. The dragon spread his wings, stretching them wide until they seemed to fill the observation deck with darkness. Humans ask, humans wonder, humans remember. It seems like a small thing, perhaps, but small things can save worlds. Watched as stepped to the edge of the deck, where a force field kept the air inside but allowed ships to pass through. Beyond the field was the endless darkness of space, filled with countless stars. "I am old," said, "older than any other being in the known galaxy. I have watched civilizations rise and fall. I have seen empires crumble. I have witnessed wonders and horrors beyond counting. But I have never seen anything quite like your species." He looked back at one more time. "Take care of our stories, little human. Take care of all the stories. You have been given a gift that no one expected. Use it well." Then he jumped. For a moment felt fear grip his heart. But then his wings caught the light and he began to fly. He soared through the force field and out into space, his scales gleaming against the darkness. He was not alone. Other dragons rose from other parts of the station. Dozens of them, survivors who had been freed from their silence over the past 10 years. They flew together in great spirals, their wings catching starlight, their fire burning in their eyes. For 3,000 years they had been scattered and alone. Now they were together again, not many compared to what they had once been, but enough to remember, enough to tell their stories, enough to pass on their fire. Watched them fly until they disappeared among the stars. Then he turned and walked back inside, where teams of human linguists were already starting their work. They had lists of unknown inscriptions to decode. They had fragments of dead languages to analyze. They had stories to find and save and share. The last fire of the had not gone out. It had simply been waiting for someone to read the words. And now that someone had, the fire was spreading. In libraries across the galaxy, scholars opened old books with new eyes. On forgotten worlds, explorers searched ruins for inscriptions they had once ignored. In schools, children learned about civilizations they had never heard of before. Not just all the lost peoples, all the forgotten stories, all the silences that had lasted too long. Humans had started something that could not be stopped. They had shown the galaxy what it looked like to care about the past, and slowly, one story at a time, the galaxy was learning to remember. Years later, when people asked why he had done it all, why he had spent his life saving languages and histories that were not his own, he always gave the same answer. Because everyone deserves to be remembered, he would say. Every person, every people, every story. We are all part of the same great tale, stretching back to the beginning of time, and every voice that falls silent takes something from all of us. He would look up then, at whatever stars were visible from wherever he stood. Besides, he would add with a small smile, you never know when one of those voices might have something important to say. You just have to be willing to listen. And somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, the dragons were still flying. The last fire was still burning. The stories were still being told. All because a human boy had looked at a rusty collar and wondered what the words meant.